If you see a teacher or a professor that is shaping the future, because that's what teachers and professors do. They shape our minds, you know.
And then you have the question, well, what are these facts? You know, I mean, if two people disagree about 2 plus 2, one person says it's 4 and somebody else says, you're crazy, it's 7, right? We don't say, oh, yeah, well, you've got your mathematical truth and you've got your mathematical truth. We say, no, look, one of you is wrong.
Dr. Finlay, thank you for coming to our podcast, The Social Venture. You are a PhD from University of Illinois. You are currently an adjunct professor at University of Southern California, and you are mostly known for your book, Confusion of Tongues, where you discuss a branch of philosophy of morality about metaethics. And can you a little bit elaborate what metaethics is? Because a lot of people do not know. They know philosophy, they know morality, they know, Friedrich Nietzsche, they know, master morality and slave morality, but a lot of people don't know what metaethics is.
Yeah, so metaethics, the word just means about or above ethics. So it's a whole set of questions about morality, and also I say not just morality, but just practical philosophy. So the question of, how should we live our lives? What ought we to do? Morality might be a part of that, but it's not all of it, right? If you say, how ought I to raise my kids? Well, is that just a moral question? No, so it has a broader scope. But metaethics asks questions about language, like what do our words mean when we say something's good? What are we thinking when we think something is good? It asks questions about the metaphysics of morality. What is goodness?
Okay.
Also, epistemological questions about how we can have knowledge of goodness. How do we know? How can we find out if something is good? Because one of the puzzles in metaethics is, if you want to know whether the table is large, you just look, right?
If it's large or not, yeah.
If you want to know whether the day is sunny, just go outside and feel it. If you want to know whether a certain way of treating somebody else is right or wrong, how do you know?
Is that where metaethics come into play?
So it's part of it. It's all of these questions about morality, questions about knowledge of morality, the reality of morality. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. The language of morality and the psychology of morality are all part of metaethics. So a little bit about the reality of morality. A sort of a key question is, when you are making moral judgments about something, you look at the actions of a government or a president maybe, and you say, that was wrong, that was right. One common view is that really moral judgments are just feelings, desires, preferences. It's just you like some things, you don't like other things. When you say that something was wrong, you're just basically saying, I don't like it. But at least in philosophy, lots of people think that's not enough. It's too subjective. There are facts about what's right and wrong. People can be correct or incorrect in their moral opinions. And then you have the question, well, what are these facts? I mean, if two people disagree about 2 plus 2, one person says it's 4 and somebody else says, you're crazy, it's 7, right? We don't say, oh, yeah, well, you've got your mathematical truth and you've got your mathematical truth. We say, no, look, one of you is wrong. Whether you have two people who disagree about what the right thing to do is, does one of them have to be wrong? So, yeah, that's an introduction to metaethics.
So are you saying that when people speak and they use certain language, certain words, there is a reason why they use those words?
Absolutely.
So if I know you had this big part in your book about the word ought, right? Can you briefly tell us about that?
Yeah, well, so the word ought or should, maybe for many of us a more commonly used
Yeah.
word, you should do this, you should do that, is a central word for philosophers. Goes back in particular to David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, 16th century, who comments, I notice I read the work of all of these moral philosophers, and they go along and they describe the way things are, and they give you facts, and then all of a sudden they give you an ought. And he says, well, what is this ought? Where does it come from? How do you go from facts about the world to statements about what ought to be? So it's a central word. And so, my approach in meta-ethics has been trying to answer these questions by looking for clues in our language and the way that our language works.
So you're saying you can predict when somebody asks a question, their true intention based on their word usage?
I wouldn't say it's quite that simple. Certainly, what we do when we use language is we communicate our thoughts to each other, right? There's something going on in your head. How do I find out about it? Well, you say words, and your words enable me to interpret what's going on in your head.
The true meaning.
So, so when we use, we speak a common language that our ability to understand each other depends upon words having meaning, where you and I both attach the same meaning to the word.
Yes.
And so that's a large part of what I study. I study the meaning of the words.
So the context is the true meaning.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say the context is essential for understanding the meaning.
I have a question.
Yes.
Movements when you're speaking. Like some people just speak, and some people, like, you use your hands and like a magician, right? Do you think that some people use movements with the words to get a message across more than just, like, even politicians? You could see some are very, like Trump, for instance, he does this a lot, right? So do you think that the words and the movements coincide with what the goal is?
Movements of speakers is not something I've studied. I think absolutely, we express ourselves in many different. Here, this is sort of the way I express myself with the waving of the hands. So I think we express ourselves in many different ways. It's not just the words we use. As you say, it's the motions that we make, and of course that's something that gets lost when you can't see somebody talking. But also it's in the sort of tone and inflection, the way that emotion gets expressed in the rise and drop of our voice, whereas I haven't made any study of the motions that people make when they're communicating. The whole second half of my book is concerned with the ways in which we communicate. Our communication depends on things other than the words we say, right? So the context in which we say them.
So we were going back and forth with Robert earlier, and he drives a motorcycle. And we were talking how if I ask Robert, hey, Robert, I don't think you should ride your motorcycle anymore because it's very dangerous. And because he's our co-host, right? He's my co-host. And we were arguing how that maybe the intention of my concern is that I don't want him to ride the motorcycle so he doesn't get into an accident, so he can make it to the studio and have a podcast with us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no, I like that analysis of what you're saying.
And obviously he's gonna, he's not gonna think directly or indirectly why Joe is saying, hey, I don't think you should drive a motorcycle. Joe cares about me.
Yeah, exactly. So let me sort of give you more context for this, right? So in philosophy, very crudely, you've the meta-ethical debate, you've got a contrast between subjectivism and objectivism. The subjectivists, extreme subjectivism, just says, look, when you tell him he shouldn't be riding his motorcycle, all you're doing is expressing your desire or wish or preference, right? And then the people on the other side says, no, that can't be all. If all you're doing is expressing what you want to him, why should he pay any attention?
Yeah.
Why should he care? You might as well just be sort of shouting at him, or, why are you using these words like should? And so the other extreme, you've got the extreme subjectivists who say, no, there's some kind of objective fact in the world, which is the fact that he shouldn't be riding his motorcycle. And then the subjectivists say, well, what facts are these?
Yeah.
Show me these facts. I can't see them. And even if there are facts, why should I care about them, right? So maybe there is a fact that I shouldn't ride my motorcycle. So what? Why should I care? And so my work, I try to find a middle ground. And your analysis brings out the middle ground nicely. I want to say, when you say to somebody that they should be doing this, you shouldn't be riding your motorcycle, there's some goal or end that you have in mind. That's where context comes in. It could be anything, but what you're saying, what you're saying about it is, this is the wrong thing to do with regard to this end.
So now,
Yes.
there's this big question comes up. Where's morality in that?
Yes. Yes.
Where's my morality of showing careness as a question and thinking about Robert, while in reality, I'm being egoistical and thinking about myself.
Yes.
Where, hey, don't ride a motorcycle, so make sure you don't crash and die so you can be my co-host.
Yes. Yeah. Now, this question becomes a little bit tricky because I think the word morality can mean different things to different people. So, one thing you might mean by it is, often when we talk about morality, what we're thinking about is, if you like, altruism or a concern for others, and so in this end framework, that's to say, your should is a moral should. If the ends that you're concerned about aren't just your personal private interest, but rather something of, an end of more general interest or concern. So if you're telling him he shouldn't ride his motorcycle, and what you mean is basically, if something happens to you, then my business is in trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a moral should.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So that's where the question arises of one's individuality, where how moral are you if you are giving or asking that question of, you care about that individual because you truly don't want him to crash, but in your real intention is different. How moral are you as an individual? That's my question,
Yes.
How do you make the judgment?
Well, the classic philosopher for you there is Immanuel Kant.
Oh, yeah.
Who says, if you want to know, really know the morality of somebody's action, you don't look at what they did, you look at why they did it. The one and the same action might be right or might be wrong, depending on the motive that it was done with.
But how can we differentiate the why for that specific question? What is the why?
What should the why be for it to be moral? Well, that's one of the most difficult questions of moral philosophy. And one thing, so the extreme subjectivists who think that there just is a property of being right or being wrong, and you just have to figure out what has that property, and then you should conform yourself, your desires, your preferences with that. They're going to say, well, it's sort of set in stone in some way, what's right and wrong. For someone like me, I don't believe in such things. I don't think the world comes with that kind of thing in it. So rather, morality, in a sense, comes from us. It's our desires and preferences. But then there's a question of, which ones, you can ask, the big question is, well, what desires, what ends should I have? Is there something? Am I just free to have any goals or desires that I want? Or are there reasons that maybe I should change if I'm only concerned about my business? And
So now the topic of normative morality comes in,
yes,
right?
yes.
Explain what is normative morality?
Well, the short answer is it has to do with morality as how we should be, rather than how we might. So, you can talk about morality in terms of whether your actions are approved by your society, by the people around you. You can talk about morality in terms of what your personal standards and values are and whether you're complying with those. And then there's the question about, are you really acting the way you should be? And so you can talk about people who have a personal morality, but it's a bad morality. Right?
This reminds me of the ethics question of the person walking the old lady across the street, and did he do it to help her, or did he do it because he wanted other people to see him walking her?
Yep.
And say, "Oh, look at that guy's a good guy," right? I think as all parents here, and we're talking about the motorcycle, and when your children start start driving. I don't know if your children are old enough to drive yet.
They're all adults.
They are?
Yeah.
So my son just recently got his license a year ago or so, and I'm like, oh, just always be careful, be careful. What is my morality in this? Is because I don't want him to leave. Do I want him by my side? Do I not want him growing up? I like him as a little kid. I mean, this is something that just popped in my head with the whole motorcycle thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm letting him grow, and it's very hard. It's very hard as a parent to just let them go.
Yes.
Right? Is that part of that whole morality? Is it ethics, integrity?
I mean, it's all related. So, I mean, a big question here is, to sort of start to get into issues in moral psychology, on a cynical view of human nature, there's a popular cynical view that ultimately all human beings only care about themselves. Psychological egoism is the idea that ultimately each of us is only out for ourselves. Everything we do, if you look to somebody, your example's a good one, somebody helping a little old lady across the street, and you say, well, there's somebody who did something unselfishly, right? Well, it's easy enough to find possible selfish motives for doing that, right? As you said, the good opinion of your fellow human beings. And so, it's popular view both among ordinary people and philosophers through history that we're all essentially selfish. But not everybody thinks that. I don't think that. I think, we have... So human beings, we're capable of desiring all kinds of different things. One of the things we're capable of desiring is just other people's happiness, other people's well-being for their own sake, with no expectation of any reward for us. And you're talking a lot about parenthood and children. That's maybe the clearest and purest example where if you're a parent, I would hope you can see in yourself that your concern for your child is not selfish or instrumental. You might have selfish and instrumental concerns as well, but that doesn't mean that your concern for them is ultimately about yourself. And I think that opens the door. If we can care about our own children for their own sake, why can't we also care about other human beings for their own sake as well? And I think what lies at the heart of most religious teachings, I think at least the moral component of most religious teachings, is the idea that we love everybody as we love ourselves.
Yes.
Not as means to our own personal ends, right? But just for its own sake. And of course, then the cynics are going to say, yeah, but why?
And my next question was going to be actually about that. Where do
Yes.
these norms come from
Yeah.
of morality, of even the norms for meta ethics, those words or usages, because those words and usages come from morality, right? I mean, the intention, or what is your moral belief? If you have a high standard of moral, then your question can't be to mean for your own personal end, right? If you have high morality, you would truly, like you said, you believe there are people who truly care about somebody's well-being, somebody's happiness. One example is you mentioned is being a parent. But outside of parenthood, uh, where do these norms come from?
Yes. So, I mean, that is one of the most fundamental questions in philosophy, I think. Um, some of the popular answers include God,
Mhm.
right? So people who subscribe to a religious morality think that um, you know God determines what our ends should be. And I guess I'll just throw out sort of standard objections to each of these views as I
Please.
describe them. So I think the issue for saying, well, it's God, is it does leave the question, okay, but why should I care about what God
Says.
wants? And you could say, well, you'll go to hell otherwise. But then, okay, now you've made this about my self-interest again,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, or you can say, well, no, it's not because of your self-interest. Just somehow the fact that God is telling you to do these things means that those are the things you ought to do, even if it's not in your self-interest. And maybe that's right, but it leaves questions, right? Well, okay, but then why should I? So that's one answer which has been historically very popular. Another answer favored by lots of philosophy professors these days is, well, it's sort of somehow written into the nature of the universe that these are the right standards to have. That myself and many other people find that just mysterious.
Yeah, because we can't guess where they originated from.
How do you know them?
That's
How
what
do
I'm
you
saying.
see them?
So how much of this comes back to Pavlov's dog?
Oh, that's a connection. I want to. There's one other major view I want to make sure I get on the table before things go on, and then we can talk about Pavlov's dog. I guess the other major theory about where these norms come from is sort of it comes from us somehow. It's something about the psychology of human beings, that there are just certain things that we are built to care about. And human beings are social animals. Maybe it's just built into us that we have this disposition to care about other people. And that's the camp that I fall in. So I think ultimately it is about us. And that does present then a challenge to you. What do you say to the completely selfish person to explain why they should live a more moral life, if the best answer you have for them is your standards and norms have to come from within yourself?
Have you heard of the phrase, there is no selfless good deed?
I have. I think it's false.
It's false?
Yes.
So do you not think if you do a good deed, it provides you happiness and joy, and because you get a kick out of it, you're happy, you're excited, you feel good about yourself, isn't that selfish?
No,
It's not. Okay.
it's not. And this is an important issue which I think comes up many times in philosophy classes. So yes, it is true that very often we get benefits from the good things that we do, and it might well be that I think it's probably true that living a moral life is actually, in general, the best life for us personally. We generally we get the appreciation of our fellow human beings. We get rewarded in all kinds of ways. We have the satisfaction
You get a
of
pat on your back.
you get the pat on the back. That's right. The fact that, but two things. First of all, it's not always true. it's not always the case that doing the right thing benefits you.
Mhm.
And those are the hard cases, right? When you know what the right thing to do is, but you're also pretty sure that it's not going to be in your interest. And then secondly, even if you do get benefits, it doesn't mean that it was selfishly motivated, because of the difference between the consequence and the motive, right? So the consequence might be you benefit, but the question of whether it's selfish is the question of why did you do it? And so the question is, it's selfish if you did it for the benefit.
So was it premeditated? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, if the benefit was premeditated.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you did it because you expected something good for yourself,
Yeah.
then it's selfish. But if you did it even knowing that it might be good for you, but
Mhm.
you did it because you were concerned, because you wanted something good for the other person, then it's not selfish.
So you argue that there is such a thing, selfless good deed.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Going back to the dog.
Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, please.
So, I mean, it seems like there's a reward in everything, right? I wrote this thing, I call it the anxiety of the afterlife, where as children, we're introduced to Santa Claus. You know, if you're a good boy, you get toys. If you're a bad boy, you get coal. And when you come to the realization that that's just a bunch of bullshit, religion has already been indoctrinated into you, where if you're a good person, you go to heaven. If you're a bad person, you go to hell. I think it all comes back down to reward, right?
Yeah, so that's a somewhat cynical view. I think, in large part, I think you're absolutely right that a lot of these norms, we just by means of conditioning and reward. And yes, I see Pavlov's dog.
Yeah.
I see the connection now. It's absolutely true that the adults we are shaped by the conditioning we received as children, and so that there are lots of ways of turning selfish little kids into unselfish adults. But one thing about it, notice, I think the conditioning process can make your motivations become non-selfish. So it might be that initially you're only motivated by food or whatever, but then conditioning is not learning, oh, okay, doing this is a means to getting the food. The conditioning is a means of developing new desires for something new. And if you develop the new desires for something which is like the well-being of others, so I think what you're pointing to is a great way for parents to bring up their children to be unselfish.
What is the
unselfish
Yeah.
people.
How do you condition your kids to become unselfish?
Well, I guess that might be more of a question for the child psychologists than for the philosophers.
No,
but I can say
From your viewpoint, as a parent, as a philosopher.
well, I'd say set a good example. Give them lots of experience and practice of doing unselfish things. Just make it part of their regular life. Just within the family unit.
Yeah.
The expectation of contributing by doing chores, right?
Oh,
is
yeah.
a way that children who are spoilt and are not asked to ever
Do
help
chores.
out with the washing, the cleaning up, etc., will almost inevitably grow into selfish adults who will only ever do things for others if they see a payoff for themselves.
Absolutely.
But if you just set the expectation that you do things for other people, and then it just becomes expected, and then then the children will develop the desire to contribute to the family, and so that's.
So I have an example through my own life. So I have two other brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. And I always ended up doing all the yard work, the cleaning of the pool and all this stuff. And the reason is because my father would say to my younger brother, I want you to cut the grass. He'd go, all right. So when he cuts the grass, he cuts down all the rhododendron bushes. So then my father would come out and go, "What did you do? You cut all the shrubs down." He goes, "I thought it was grass." He goes, "You're never gonna do this again, Bobby. You're gonna do the grass next time." So he got out of a lot of stuff by doing things the wrong way, which then the burden falls on top of me, and I would do it.
Yeah.
So as far as morality, like how do you determine, like, to get that type of personality to not do the wrong thing, so he has to contribute, because we're talking about contributing to chores, so he never had to contribute, so I had to pick up the slack for him.
Yes. Well, I think if you forgive me for saying, I think that was a parenting mistake
I agree.
by your father. Yeah, he shouldn't have rewarded your brother for doing the wrong thing.
So I don't do that with my kid. I make sure my kids all,
Do it equally.
do equally, and I look at each. But you have to look at the strengths and the weaknesses, and this one's gonna. But I want to get back to the religious aspect of morality, because I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 8 years, and they give you these 10 commandments, and one of them is "Thou shalt not kill." However, during the Crusades, they murdered lots of people. During wars, I would ask the nuns, I thought we're not supposed to kill people. Well, because we're on the right side. This is our side, so it's okay if we kill the bad side. How is this determined in just society?
Yeah, so I think the thing I want to say about this is that organized religions are really political institutions, and they become structures in which multiple people live over long periods of time, and they get reinterpreted. And if you're an adherent of the faith, then you call these abuses, right? If you're outside the faith, then you say no, that the faith itself is corrupt. So I hesitate to sort of judge a religion on the basis of what some of its adherents do. I mean, you can certainly look at the Bible and say, where in the what you say are the sacred the scriptures is your basis for the Crusades. Where is your basis for slavery? Where is the basis? So clearly, people calling themselves Christians have done many, many things that receive no support in Scripture. I'm not religious myself. I'm not a Christian. But I think that there's a lot of truth in many religious teachings, particularly the moral teachings, not so much the metaphysical, maybe.
Do you think the Bible provides norms to morality? And are they right norms, standards or?
So, in large part, yes. So, yes, certainly it provides moral guidance. I mean, millions and millions of billions of people have lived their lives and shaped their morality according to the moral teachings of Christianity, as well as Islam and Judaism and basic. I mean, it's a basic function of religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think is to give people a moral code. Is it all good? No, I think that goes back to the point that organized religion is an institution, and it becomes everybody. It becomes there's a political negotiation or jockeying about what becomes orthodoxy, and then people's agendas come in. I think from my point of view, the sort of pure moral core of any religion, which you find basically across religions, is this idea of loving others as you love yourself, and then all the other stuff is largely political.
Is there an example possibly from Scripture where that moral standard is not correct, or you don't align with it yourself?
Examples in scripture
Yeah.
of moral codes
Yes.
that I
Do
do not agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just about anything which involves sexual morality, I think. And I mean, one problem I think with scripture is that it's a hangover of a past time. So you're talking about context.
Mm-hmm.
The rules which worked
Back then.
2,000 years ago don't necessarily work now. And we can't be so completely beholden to what seemed like a good system of rules 2,000 years ago that we sort of don't use our own reasoning capacity in order to sort of adjust our moral sensibilities to current circumstances. And I mean, just I think a good example of this is gay marriage,
Okay.
right? Which the Bible seems
Specifically
pretty
against.
specifically against.
Yeah.
And then for a very long time, partly for in the West for thousands of years, largely under the influence of the Bible, it was unquestioned, right? Homosexuality is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Then you saw, I thought it was one of the most beautiful and rapid sort of bits of moral progress in certainly in my lifetime when gay marriage was proposed, where you saw a sudden swing in popular opinion. Now, maybe I'm wrong and overlooking something about sexual morality, so I don't mean to be sort of asserting my views on sexual morality here. I'm just sort of using it as an example. But for me, the reason it's a good example for me is because you saw popular opinion change so fast. Within just a few years, it went from only 30% of people approved of it to something like 70, 80% of people approved of it. And I think that's because people were just asked to think. They said, how is it really wrong if two people who love each other get to enjoy the same protections, legal protections, and all the rest that
others do not?
That others do. Right.
Yeah.
Now, and so, look, I'm not saying that I'm right about the case and others are wrong, but I think it's an example where just the swing in popular opinion is an illustration that morality is contextual to a large extent. Things that were bad in the past perhaps aren't bad now.
How much of that do you think is due to the media?
The swing?
Because I mean, I didn't know any gay people till I went to college, and then I started understanding. Like, I'm all for it. You want to marry another guy? You want to marry another one? I'm all for that. That's your life. Do it what you wish. Yeah. But I remember when Elton John in the 70s came out, and kids I was going to school with, they stopped listening to his music. Like, it was such a negative thing to be gay.
Yeah.
And then with the MTV, the music videos, and all of the media, social media.
Harvey Milk.
Yeah, I mean, you had even Obama was against gay marriage, and then he changed his tune So I think the media and the constant barrage of social media shows they can change a whole movement from something that is completely bad to completely good, and with morality and with integrity and all the stuff we talk about. Where do you draw the line with the social media?
Yeah,
in
popular opinion, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a huge that's a huge issue. And I mean, what in some ways you're sort of challenging me. I mean, I've suggested you saw this huge swing in popular opinion. Why was this? Well, because people thought about it and saw the truth. And you're saying, well, isn't that sort of really media manipulation?
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, this was a good development because of media, but then similarly, media can also have toxic effects, and I think
and intentions.
I think that's might even be the largest social problem that we face in the world today. That social media has become so powerful and all-invasive that each of us has a direct propaganda tool in our pocket that we're staring at all the time, being manipulated by bad intentioned actors. It's like the way I think about it is that the challenge that America faces, liberal democracies face today, is like in World War II. If the UK government had issued every single Brit fighting against the Germans this personal radio where they could hear Hitler's daily addresses.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're dealing with in America right now, right? I mean, the posts might not, the tweets and so forth might not come with signed Vladimir Putin on them.
Yeah.
But
They are coming. Well, yeah. And do you think that has a lot to do with American morality, decline in morality in America? Looking at the trajectory and just overall America's morality has decreased by 50%. Compared to incarceration, socioeconomic statuses, and so on and so forth.
I wouldn't want to quantify it, but I definitely think that that America has seen a huge moral decline in recent years. And I think it's always a symptom. It's always a consequence of other things. And I think it comes down in a sense to failure of education, but I don't mean that in the sense of schools are failing. I mean that in the sense that people are losing the ability to empathize and understand where other people are coming from. And I think social media has a huge part to do with that, because social media has fragmented. Social media is algorithm driven, right? So what we consume is driven by
our own
interests. And so it's feeding, going back to the issue about selfishness versus selflessness, we are being fed information based on our selfishness. And that just puts selfishness on steroids. Now, not only do we see, I see that they've got their interests, but I'm going to pursue my interests. Now we don't even recognize other people's interests because we only see the information that fits with our own. And so I think, if I had to use two words to identify the cause of the current decline in morality, I would say social media.
Social media.
Yeah.
Do you think that's across the board, all over the world, or just in America?
I think across the board, yes. I think America has been particularly bad.
And how much of this do you think is, because I was born in the 60s, so we were talking earlier about the nuclear family and having at least one parent at home when the kid comes home from school for questions. If you want to ask, hey, how did school go? Any questions? Now that these children are coming home to empty homes and all they have is either the TV or the phone or the computer, and they're gathering all of their knowledge in how to act from these programs. You think that's a big part of why morality is going down, like the porn, like they say that the most watched stuff on these phones are porn, and the way women are treated, the rap music, the way that they talk about women, calling them whores and bitches, and you think that has a big part to do with I know we're talking the language, but morality, how morality is slowly declining year by year?
Tough question. I don't think I have any particular insight to that. It's not the kind of, I guess I'm liberal rather than conservative leaning, so my instincts have never been to blame those kinds of things. But it's a question for sociologists. I think about whether it's been a contributing factor. I mean, I think single parent families. Well, I think that with the scourge of social media doesn't make a difference whether you've got one parent or five.
Well,
if the parents, if there are plenty of two-parent families where the kids are basically, seems like the kids are basically being raised by social media these days, and maybe because the parents are as addicted to the social media themselves. So yeah, I personally I wouldn't put the blame in those places so much, but yeah, that's an empirical
can't
question
we-
for social scientists. I
Can't
think.
we point back to the parents? I mean, let's say, yes, if those kids are being raised by social media, as Dr. Finlay is referring, but
Well, because
the parents are also in charge of that.
but
So
both
if the-
parents have to work because of societies. Everything is so expensive, and so there's nobody home. And even nuclear family, meaning there could be two gay parents, it could be two straight parents. It's
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter that there's nobody home for the young people because of whether both parents have to work just to put bread on the table, and there's nobody there.
That I understand. I mean, you're now referring to already the economics of the family.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to refer back to is, yes, you're mentioning that the kids can be raised or are being raised by social media because the parents are not present, but they are present throughout the day or after work, right? And they should have standards. And if their standards are where, oh, it's okay for my kids to be constantly on their phones or on their iPads or on television, that means their norms are not to where, I don't know how to rephrase this for people not to, be insulted, but where their guidelines of parenting are not there. It's not correct. It's not right. I mean, to my personal opinion, that is.
Well, so I think parenting is always a piece of the puzzle, but personally, I never look to blame parents as sort of as an overall social movement, because we're all just human beings, and if parenting is going downhill, then it's because there's some factor. It's not like people suddenly got worse and it's the people's fault for getting worse. Something has happened.
Yeah, their
Right.
morals
And
have
so-
gone down, have declined, because we as parents are also have a level of morality where we think before allowing or disallowing our children, to do something. For instance, I'm going to bring you a great example. My wife loves to buy my three boys, like, I don't know, they ask for something, she loves to buy it. And I always argue with her in the sense of, hey, don't spoil them. They're not supposed to. And she refers to back to the monetary side where it's inexpensive. I'm like, dude, it's not about expensive or inexpensive. That is not the point. The point being is, I don't think you should shower your children with, insignificant toys and gifts and for no reason, and that's just one parenting guideline that I have in my family. I don't think your kids should constantly be bought things from Amazon just because somebody has it or he wants it for the sake of wanting it. I mean, that's what I'm referring to as an example.
Yeah. I mean, parenting is hard, right? So I don't think I want to weigh in on I mean, certainly I have sympathies with you thinking that,
Do you agree with that or no?
Yes and no. So yes, I agree. Children can be spoilt. They shouldn't be made to attach their worth to physical, to trinkets and little things. On the other hand, I guess if I was to argue in defense of your wife, I'd say maybe it's the need for her to express her love to so that it's not the objects maybe so much.
You're
as the
absolutely
need for
right.
her
That's
to.
the only reason she's doing it,
Mhm.
and I know that because that's the type of a mother she is.
Yeah.
She's just too loving of her, and I'm not saying that I'm not loving, but my other way of love is for me to raise good children, and I think that's also where morality is shaped. Right? Can you confirm or deny what I'm saying?
Yep.
For your
perfectly happy
children
with
not
that.
to be showered with items and toys and gifts for no purpose and no reason, just because they want to. That's where morality is shaped as well, because they're a sponge. If they see that, while I'm growing up, my parents have purchased absolutely everything for me, then their moral standard would be, hey, I'm entitled to this. I should have everything, right? Do you agree?
Yes, I think that can certainly happen. So, I think with many of these things, it's about balance, right? Just as Aristotle said, or Goldilocks, I guess, not too much, not too little. Um,
So I want to ask you about, because you're big into semantics, and like I think one of the catchphrases that came out, I'm going to say at probably the 90s, not maybe the 80s, just do it.
Oh yeah.
And it's been kind of constantly drilled into our heads. Just do it. Just do it. It could be like, you know what? I want those sneakers. I'm just gonna do it, right? But you think that also is subliminally put in our brains through the words, so they don't look at the effect, the cause and effect of just doing something just because it feels good?
I haven't given a whole lot of thought to this. What you say sounds very plausible to me. I think it is true that I think American culture sort of encourages impulsivity in action in a way that, in a lot of other countries, it's not part of the culture. There's more inbuilt caution. Is it good or is it bad? I think that's usually a much more complex question than, usually for anything that humans do, there's a whole lot of consequences. Some
Yeah.
of them good, some of them bad. And I think one thing that one very human tendency is to always oversimplify everything. So I think one thing that I think I take this opportunity to say is, I think an unfortunate thing about human beings is that we oversimplify, and we look to something happens, or a policy, or a event, and is it good or is it bad? And then we just look for, we see a good consequence and we say, it's good. We see a bad consequence and we say, it's bad. But of course, things have many consequences, so it's often hard to know, I think, in balance whether something is good or bad.
So with semantics, are there in your research, are there points in history where they can pinpoint how things change because of semantics?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not an expert in sort of the history of the meaning of words, but I am very interested in it because I think there are, so a nice thing about language is we have a historical record of how it developed, how it was used at different times. And you can certainly, for my purposes, you can see some very interesting developments in the use of words. Although I'm not sure that I can think of any right now that I think you would find interesting in relation to the things we've been talking about. I mean, one reason for that is it's part of my view of the way that the normative language works, that the normative words themselves, like should and good, are very flexible, right? You need an end in the picture. The end can be anything. And then, so if you want to know, what are the right ways to be, what morals are good morals, what norms should we have, I don't actually think that the semantics of the words are going to help us with that, because they're too general purpose. It's like saying, is a knife good? Well, what are you using it for? If you're trying to stab someone, it's
good.
bad. If you're trying to butter your bread, it's good. And so that's why, for me, there's a bit of a disconnect between the semantics and sort of the important moral questions about how we ought to live our lives.
I have a question of morality about entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. Are their moral standards the same when they are just starting out? And do their moral standards change when they are extremely successful?
So I can only speculate because I haven't known a lot of entrepreneurs. There's not a lot of them in universities, and that's been my life for a while. Speculatively, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's human nature. People change depending on the course of their life, right? And so what I would expect is, people devote their lives to building a business, building personal wealth, then that becomes your guiding value. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because, it's about outside my experience, but as it seems to me, entrepreneurship is a life calling which is focused on sort of building resources, wealth for oneself, which is not to say it's a bad thing. We're all engaged in trying to make a living, right, and advance ourselves and our families and so on. But I think that there is probably a particular danger, given human nature, for that calling, that those values are then going to crowd everything else out, and you'll become insensitive to other kinds of values. So contrast it with, I mean, look, why am I a university professor? Well, if I didn't need to make a living, then I wouldn't be employed at a university. But my day-to-day life as an academic is not focused on the money just comes in passively, right, in a salary each month. And what my goals, my aims are knowledge and education, right? So I'm focused on the truth, and I'm focused on other people's growth, intellectual growth. So I think those then, become, when it is, I guess, Pavlov, your conditioning, when you devote yourself and you devote your days to pursuing certain goals, then those become the central goals in your life, and other things pale in significance. And so I imagine then that for the entrepreneur who devotes their life to building wealth, building
Yes, but
resources.
for entrepreneurs, it's not only about building wealth. I mean, building wealth is definitely a part of it. But, through that journey, comes a time, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs would agree with me with this, that it's not about the money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the experience. It's about going to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
You pass this level, you want to go to the second level and third level. I'm just bringing an example to simplify my argument. And as you said, you're a professor, and you are a professor first by choice, and the income just comes with it because you love what you're doing, correct?
That's right.
So is for entrepreneurs. But my question is it's not about finance and wealth. My question is, when you as a entrepreneur, you grow in your business, and you scale, you become very successful. For instance, do you think Elon Musk's or Jeff Bezos' morals are the same from the day they started to where they are today? Do they look at life and morality differently?
I expect they do.
And
yes.
Do you think that's right, though? Do you think to have a set of moral standards where we grow up with, for instance, don't cheat, don't lie, right? And in business, unfortunately, a lot of people cheat. In the beginning, they do not, and then they get a taste of it maybe. They like it, feels good, they make money off of it, and they start cheating. But originally, their moral standard was, hey, there's no way I'm going to cheat.
Yeah.
How can entrepreneurs maintain their original good moral standards, and not divert to, these unethical acts in business?
Yeah, well, that's an important question, a tough question, yeah, really. I mean, I would defer to the psychologist but to speculate. I think if they want to avoid sort of going down that rabbit hole, then I think it's important to always make room in their lives for other values, so that there's another side to them, whether it's, I don't know, coaching kids and youth leagues, or whether it's their religious church, or it doesn't really matter what it is, or studying philosophy on the side. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but just something so that you
I want to.
appropriately corrected my characterization of entrepreneurship. I don't know that much about it.
It's just I want to reference to Nietzsche's master
Mhm.
morality and
Mhm.
slave morality,
Okay.
and based on master morality, that morality comes from power, right? And slave morality comes from humility. And with entrepreneurship, as you are successful, more power comes, more wealth comes, and people associate power with wealth. How do you make sure that that humility is still instilled in you while you are powerful? The same thing goes across the board for other industries or other businesses. For instance, politics. A lot of politicians start with this idea of, hey, we're going to do good, we're going to create jobs, we're going to make sure nobody interferes with our politics, with our head. And then these lobbyists come in, wealth comes in.
Yeah, so I don't think I want to address this in relation to the master and slave morality, which I see a little bit differently. But yeah, the importance of, I totally agree that this is a real problem, that as people are more successful in life, then they lose humility, they become less compassionate, their judgment often becomes worse. This is just human nature. You're asking me for practical advice on how to. Now, I mean, practical advice is not sort of my forte, but I'm happy to offer opinions. I think a huge part of it is, to connect with what I said before about people oversimplifying things and failing to see, that things have different consequences. I think, when you've been successful, there's a natural tendency to think that it's because you're great. And when you start to think that, and when you see other people less successful, there's a natural tendency to think, oh, they're not so great. And then, of course, there's going to be a tendency to think that you're better than other people. And then you're going to start dismissing other people's opinions, dismissing other people's contributions. And then you get to the point where, hey, you might think that I know enough that I can just go into the government and rip everything to shreds and rebuild it from scratch, right? Extreme arrogance and hubris. How do you avoid that? It involves a very heavy dose of ignorance. It involves failing to see, for one thing, that your successes are partly on the basis of luck, how things could have gone very differently for you, partly seeing that other people have made, that your successes have depended on the contributions of other people who may have made them selflessly and with no expectation of gain in return. And what I want to say, although I'm trying to think of a way of sort of motivating it, is just keep an open heart so that you keep trying to see the world through other people's eyes and understand how the world seems from other people's opinions. And I think that's sort of maybe the biggest danger in getting too full of yourself, that you stop even trying to understand how the world looks from other people's positions.
Is that what you're saying? Is that a moral issue where humility comes into play, and for you to understand that, hey, it's not only because of you, and just because you're successful, you cannot dismiss others?
I think it comes down to ignorance. As a young entrepreneur, when I was younger, and I can relate to everything you were saying when you first started saying it, is like, I go to work every day. I got my own business. Every year you're looking at the date. Oh, I only did $600 in this day. Last year, I wanted to do $1,200, and you're always like looking to go better and better, and you don't really focus. And why? I'm not gonna. That person, they're just lazy. That's why they're not anywhere. They're just lazy. Yeah. And this is the mindset when you're young and you're an entrepreneur. And then through fate, I ended up going into academia, and being around intellectuals, and not that I'm a big intellectual lover or a big business lover, but you can actually sit there and learn and listen and learn how to decipher and to weigh balance. Like this person, they're not successful. It's not because they're lazy. It's because of their situation. It's because of A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
So for me, as a person that lived in both worlds and still does, it's that kind of surfing, because on both sides you got bad, and both sides you got good, and being able to morality, being able to decipher what is your objective.
Can I give you a particular example?
Mhm.
School teachers, people who early childhood education. America treats these people like dirt. You look at what they're paid.
Absolutely
And so, this perspective, these people are failures. These are the people we're entrusting with our children
Absolutely.
and the future of the world. And yet, so if you look at these people and they're struggling to make ends meet, why is it? It's not because they're bad entrepreneurs. It's because they care about something else.
So
They care about the children.
But do they?
Well,
Because
there's
you have a lot of people that want to get into the system because like as a teacher, a professor, as a person that also went through that. I took over an acting class one time for a professor of mine that had to go away, and she said, "Could you teach my class for a couple of weeks?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So by the time I was done teaching that class, they asked me, "Could you stay and have her go?" Because she would sit there and put on musicals. So I think, and I would engage the students and I'd get them up on their feet to do things. I think a lot of our profession, teaching, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't think I am, these people get lazy, okay? And like my kids go to high school, and certain teachers they love. Oh, I love his class because they can relate to the young people rather than just saying statistics. Well, on this date and this and that. So I think there were great teachers, but there were also lazy
I want to
teachers.
disagree with you for a moment, and let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
I think if we paid our teachers and professors much, much higher wage, the employer can be more selective and hire the staff and the teacher and the professor who can be, as you were saying, more engaging,
No.
more thorough,
Money
more-
is not it is
No.
it is a passion. As an
It is a
educator, it's a
passion.
passion.
You're
You
right.
can pay
You're
me
right.
$20,000 a year
Uh-huh.
to teach kids, and I'll have the best time in the world. Money is
You're
is not-
absolutely right. Passion is, yes, 100%.
so giving people more money means you're going to get more people that are doing it for the money
No,
rather than for.
No, what I'm trying to say, you can be more selective and you can select the passionate. If you see a teacher or a professor that is shaping the future, because that's what teachers and professors do. They shape our minds. Your education or your thoughts were shaped by certain professors, right? So was I, so were you. And if we pay enough money, not $30,000, not $40,000 to a teacher, which is nothing today, that's like not even a medium income kind of a deal. If we pay him $100,000, $200,000 a year, the correct staff can be hired for them to be more enthusiastic, more relative to today's world than, to people where, hey, I'm just going to be a teacher. It's a laid back job. I'm just going to go and put on the TV. I had teachers like that. They would just put on, hey, watch this movie, write me an essay.
So can I say, I think there's truth on both sides here. I definitely agree more with you. But here's the thing. Yes. So look, in every profession, in every course of choice of life, you've got people who are engaged and people who are disengaged. People who are putting effort, people who are not. And so yes, I don't dispute that there are bad teachers. And I think I agree that pay teachers more, you're going to attract better people. And so I think the thing is, it's not as complex as saying, well, look, if you're a good teacher should be doing it out of passion, so it shouldn't make any difference what you pay them, because people are complicated. right? And it's not like, the teacher who only cares about the kids and the education and doesn't care about anything else is pretty rare. I mean, they do exist. And
Yes.
so that's when even when you treat teachers like shit, you still get some extremely good teachers. But most of us are sort of complex people who have, people might get into teaching because they have a passion for children, and then the job grinds them down. They get nothing out of it. They can't take vacations. They have to work second jobs. And then, then you get people who are burnt out, who don't care.
There are some teachers today in America, they put money out of their own pocket to buy supplies for their class. I mean, that's just not normal in my opinion. You can't, take out of your own salary, which you make $30,000-$40,000. Elementary.
But that doesn't have to do with their payroll. It has to do with the overall budget of the school system not putting enough money
That's what
into
I'm saying.
the
That's
school.
how terrible it is. It's just that specific teacher is so enthusiastic and so passionate about their job that they are willing to take out that extra few $100s and purchase, those school items that they need for that class.
So if I can bring this back full circle to the entrepreneur, part of the reason why I mentioned the case of the teacher is, the humility, the way in which the entrepreneur should have humility is recognizing that without the teachers, there would be no business to build.
Entrepreneurs.
Not just because they wouldn't be where they were if they hadn't had education, but also where would society, where would the consumers be? Where would the if you didn't have children, teachers educating children. Losing
No, go ahead. Don't worry.
fluency here, but I mean, I mentioned this in part. Part of the reason I mentioned this is I have in mind my daughter who works in early child care education. She got a a bachelor's degree from USC, and then she found her niche. Her love is working with young children, and I think she's like an early intervention. These kids often come very troubled, often from bad homes. They arrive in school and they're already, in some cases, they're broken. They can't relate to adults. They can't relate to other children, and they're on a direct road to jail and all kinds of bad things. And she is able to get through to some of these kids. She's able to change lives. But what strikes me is she isn't paid a living wage. Think about how much money she is saving society. For each kid who doesn't go to jail because they get that early intervention, they learn how to succeed in school, that saves the country.
Or how much more money she's going to make for this country by educating and influencing those minds and shaping them to be productive human beings of society.
Is she doing it for the money or
No.
because of the love?
She does it for the love. She does it for the love.
But how much happier would she be if she was whatever she's getting paid right now? If she was making $120,000 a year,
And
You
how
can
long?
only surmise.
How long will she continue doing it?
Exactly.
Because she will never be able to buy a house.
Absolutely, and that's my point.
Yeah, but houses in California.
I know, but let's not go
you
back.
you gotta make like
Well,
$2-3 million.
she's not in
to buy a
California.
house.
She's in Australia. But
But also, how I know property and housing in Australia is also very expensive. It's not like unless you go to some eastern side of Australia where I don't know nobody lives, but
western side. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
or western
yeah.
side.
I mean, my big points are humility. Look, be aware that the reason why other people are not successful by your metrics is because they have other values and are devoting themselves to other ends. That those other ends are important and are things that you should care about. Like having law-abiding fellow citizens who are able to hold down jobs and have money to go and buy your whatever products you're producing. I mean that's kind of the big picture, right?
Dr. Finlay, how would you conclude today?
It's been a wide-ranging conversation, right? It's been fun. Um,
What would you want to tell our audience about morality?
you just keep an open heart and always, be intellectually humble in the sense of, never make the mistake of thinking you know it all, and that, yeah, you've always got something to learn from other people by listening and trying to understand where they're coming from.
I have a question because I haven't heard the word ought in so long. I mean, I don't remember even in the last 20 years even using it.
Uh-huh.
And when I looked you up, that word is constantly by your name. Is that a big word in Australia?
Yeah, look, no, it's not Australia. I did my PhD training here and was here for 20 years. It's more historical reasons, I think. So, I think ought and should basically mean the same thing. Should is a very common word. You use that word every single day.
Yes.
So, when I say I'm an expert on ought, I'm an expert on should. The same thing. As to why in philosophy the focus has been on ought more than should, it's because philosophy is always looking to its past, and hundreds of years ago it was ought was the word, and so we continue to.
Who's your favorite philosopher?
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yep.
Did he inspire you to be what you are today? Reading his works.
Yeah, certainly it was a very important part of my intellectual development.
So, if you like Nietzsche, do you like Dostoevsky?
I haven't been much of a reader of literature, to be honest.
But he was also a
existentialist
philosopher.
writer.
Yeah.
Yes,
Because Nietzsche was heavily inspired by Dostoevsky.
Nietzsche had a lot of influences. Yes, he. I not really qualified to talk about Dostoevsky, but.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Finlay, for coming. We appreciate it. I think it was a great show.
It's lively.
Yeah, it was fun for me.
Awesome. I loved it.
Mr. Myers.
Yes, I loved it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, honestly.
Thank you for inviting me.